Good morning and welcome to our Autumn Budget Statement Report. I'm Andrew Nellies and I'm here with my colleagues Gerry, Celaya and David Michael. So first question, Gerry. The budget, do you feel it was positive or negative for the UK economy with debt still rising and public spending falling?
I think it was a mixed bag. And net, I think what the foreign exchange market focused on was probably the right thing, which is the OBR forecasts are for GDP to be broadly positive this year, 3%, which is up from previous estimates. And next year and the year after that, 2.4 and 2.2% GDP growth. And I think if you focus on that side of it, it's actually okay. In terms of the rising debt, though, that is a bit of a problem. And I think the estimates are optimistic in terms of the debt reduction. It's one of those things where you look at it now and you say, okay, you can see why they had to adjust their figures now because reality bit, if you want to put it that way. But the forecast for the next 3 to 4 years are for the government to actually make a heck of a lot of spending cuts. And I think that's something that the market's going to have to take on board at some stage, that we have a heck of a lot of public spending cuts ahead of us.
David?
No, I largely agree with Gerry. As I say, GDP forecasts going kind of near term, broadly positive, as it was made abundantly clear by Osborne in the budget. With regards to kind of medium term, I guess, as I say, there's revisions downwards, largely due to kind of lower tax revenues. We shall see where that gets us, but largely positive.
So you mentioned there about the falling GDP growth estimates. How do you feel that they will affect bond yields and the FX, so sterling in general?
The way I look at it, it's going to be a case of two halves. Right now, we're enjoying the good half, which is this pound is strong against the euro for all the right reasons, and we should see that continue if, broadly speaking, the forecasts are right and UK growth remains broadly positive, and the public finances are kind of ignored. In other words, everything's to be fixed at some stage. If, however, current account deficits and budget deficits become a problem, then you could see some sort of pressure on the pound. That's probably a 2016 story, maybe late 2015 story, and obviously the Bank of England has a role to play as well. But broadly speaking, I'd say it's one of those things where bond yields or gilt yields may be dragged higher if people start worrying about the debt problem or the debt numbers, and you could see some effect on the pound. The near-term effect would be positive. People like high yields in a currency. If it becomes more of a problem, though, then it would be pretty much broadly negative. But we haven't had a current account crisis in the UK in a long time, have we?
No. I suppose another question being is, do you think that any of the budget statement will have any effect on the Bank of England's decision on when they're likely to raise interest rates?
I think there's nothing there that really made the Bank of England think about their timing. They probably said, okay, this is more or less as expected. I think maybe the stamp duty effect will be interesting for the Bank of England because they're on the other side of the housing market as well.
Yeah.
And but I think broadly speaking, they'd be pretty happy being on hold for now too.
Yeah, I think with regards to, you touched on stamp duty, certainly it may do something to cool London prices down. I think the threshold is 935,000. At that point, you're probably worse off if you're buying property with the new kind of tiered structure, such as the structure that is very similar to income tax now. So, I think that may act as a cooling. I mean, the reaction in the market yesterday, you would expect, volumes to increase nationwide, but again, some of the more London-focused estate agents, you saw no reaction whatsoever. So the likes of Foxtons, Winkworth as well, there was muted reaction to that. I think where you may see an increase is perhaps the house builders. It might be a sector that we continue to look at going forward, certainly.
So one of the Chancellor's main changes, tax changes, was the introduction of the new 25% charge on multinationals' earnings in the UK. How do you think that will impact on future investment in the UK and potentially on UK jobs?
I think it'll be neutral, mostly because, not to be too cynical, but I'd assume that all the multinationals, Google, et cetera, would have pretty good accountants who can look at this and say, okay, here's how we try to work around it. That's what they do. Net, I'd say the UK is a great place to have investments in because it's a growing economy. It's a gateway to Europe for a lot of American firms and Chinese firms as well. It's one of the places where you want to do business in. The 25% sort of multinational tax will probably be sidestepped, I'd say.
I agree again with Gerry, actually. I think it's probably one for the voters with the election in mind in May. I don't necessarily think it will make too much of a difference.
I agree with you both on that. I think it was one of those things where, I think it was probably going to be political suicide if they didn't actually introduce it. But I think it kind of works for everybody. And although we'll be a leader, if you like, in the global introduction of this charge, but I think it's only a matter of time before everybody introduces it. Okay, and what do we think, I suppose as an investment committee team, who do we think were the real winners and losers from yesterday's budget statement?
Sure, on the loser side, I'll take those. And I'd probably say banks were clearly marked out for being a soft target to punch, once again. It's one of those things where the government owns a significant stake in the key banks in the UK, and yet they seem to be trying to do their best to get money out of them. This is just another example of, I guess, changing things at the last minute. And in terms of fairness and this, that, and the other, you can't argue against it. In terms of changing the tax code pretty fast, then I think it's going to be kind of worrying. I would say that most of the big accounting firms are probably scratching their heads and saying if they do this really fast to the banks, in terms of an overnight change in the tax regime, as far as being able to account for losses, then that could set a worrying precedent for other companies down the road. It's something to worry about. I don't think it'll actually happen into changing the tax code that quickly for that many companies down the road. I think bank bashing is still in fashion. It's an election coming up. But it's something to probably watch in terms of tax regime being changed overnight.
Yeah, in terms of winners, I certainly think, again, the house builders has been a winner of the autumn statement. Andrew, you mentioned this morning that two of the house builders have actually been entered into the FTSE 100 this morning. So again, we could look towards that. Also others, again, I mentioned estate agents as well, focused on countrywide or nationwide rather than perhaps just the London market. Other than that, you've got a slight adjustment in the air duties as well, so you could look at airlines. Obviously ties in with the lower oil price anyway. But certainly those sectors are probably the real winners of the budget.
Cool. So I suppose finally, the Chancellor surprised us again with another fundamental change to the ISA rules. How do you feel they'll impact on investors?
Well, I think the rise in the ISA allowance for 2015-16 fiscal year, I don't think that was any surprise. So it's gone from 15,000 to 15,240. I think the big change that you're referring to is probably the rules upon death. Previously, the ISA wrapper was no longer upon death, but now you can actually pass the ISA to your spouse, and I think that's, as I say, a real positive change. And I certainly think that advocates saving in an ISA wrapper going forward. Certainly, if you're looking at saving in ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs, then certainly give us a call. I think we offer managed services within these tax efficient wrappers. So certainly, I think it's something that people should continue to look at.
So just like to say thanks very much, Gerry and David, for attending and giving us your insights this morning. And thanks very much to you guys for watching.